The mountain did not welcome visitors. It never had. Its roads curled like old scars along the ridge, narrow, unforgiving, edged by drop-offs that disappeared into white nothing during the winter months. The pines stood close together, shoulder to shoulder, as though conspiring to block out the sky. Snow fell here differently than it did in towns. It fell with intention. It buried things, kept secrets the way only wilderness can, quietly, completely, without apology. The chimney smoke rose first. Thin and gray against a pewter sky, it curled upward from a cabin set back from the road, half swallowed by tree line. Inside that smoke was the suggestion of warmth, of life, though from the outside, the cabin looked more like a warning than an invitation. A single light burned in the window. The woodpile beside the door was stacked with mathematical precision. The porch held a pair of boots, a rifle lean, and nothing else. Then came the sound. An engine, struggling, coughing, the mechanical groan of something pushed too far in the wrong conditions. A truck appeared on the upper bend of the road, its headlights cutting weak yellow shapes into the gray afternoon. It slowed, shuddered, and then, with a sound like a quiet surrender, it stopped. Steam rose from the hood. The door opened. A woman stepped out. Elias Colt heard the engine before he saw the truck. He'd been splitting wood behind the cabin when the sound reached him. Wrong rhythm, wrong pitch, the kind of engine noise that meant trouble for someone who didn't know these roads. He set the axe down slowly. He was not a man who moved quickly unless the situation demanded it, and he had learned, at considerable cost, to tell the difference. He was 44 years old, though the mountain had aged him in ways that had nothing to do with years. His hands were large, calloused, cracked at the knuckles from cold and work. His jaw carried a beard that had stopped being a choice and become simply a feature of his face. His eyes were the color of the lake in October, dark, still, giving nothing away. He'd come to this mountain 3 years ago after the funeral, after the paperwork, after the last person who loved him looked at him across a kitchen table and said, "I can't reach you anymore, Elias. I've been trying and there's nothing there." He hadn't argued. He'd driven north. He'd found this cabin listed in a foreclosure notice and he'd paid cash and he'd stayed. He rounded the side of the cabin and saw the truck. Steam. A woman standing beside it, one hand on the hood, looking up the road and then down it as if calculating which direction held less danger. He almost went back inside. He stood there, axe still in his hand, watching her register his presence. She didn't scream. She didn't step back. She looked at him with the particular steadiness of someone who had already decided, before this moment, that she would not show fear. That was the first thing he noticed about her. "Hood latches on the left," he said, because he didn't know what else to say. "I know where the hood latch is," she said. He almost smiled. Almost. Her name was Clara. She offered it the way people offer something they've practiced offering, smoothly, without hesitation, without any of the small social nervousness that usually comes with introductions. She said she was passing through. She said her phone had no signal. She said she just needed to wait somewhere warm while the engine cooled, and then she'd figure out the rest. She did not say where she was going. He noticed that. He let her in anyway, because the temperature was dropping toward the kind of cold that had opinions about survival, and because whatever else Elias Colt was, he was not the kind of man who left a woman on a mountain road in weather like this. She looked around the cabin interior with careful eyes, the kind that cataloged exits before they cataloged furniture. He noticed that too. "I can cook," she said, when the silence between them had stretched long enough to require filling. She was looking at his kitchen, sparse, functional, the kind of setup that said a man was feeding himself rather than eating. "If you let me stay a couple of weeks, until I can arrange something, I'll earn my keep." Elias looked at her for a long moment. 2 weeks, he said. 2 weeks, she agreed. It should have been simple. A transaction. A temporary arrangement between strangers on a mountain in winter. The kind of thing that would mean nothing later. But that first night, he woke at 2 in the morning to a sound from the kitchen. He lay still, listening. It wasn't the sound of someone getting water. It was the sound of someone standing at the window watching the road. He began to pay a different kind of attention. He was good at it. Years of ranging had made him fluent in the language of small things. The way snow held a footprint. The way a deer's posture changed when something was wrong upwind. He applied that same fluency to Clara. She cooked with extraordinary skill. Not the skill of someone who had taken classes, the skill of someone who had cooked in difficult conditions with limited ingredients, who had learned to make something from almost nothing. She worked quietly. She never hummed. She positioned herself, always, with a wall behind her and a window in her eye line. On the third day, he found the burner phone. It was tucked behind the spare linens in the closet, the kind you bought at a gas station with cash. It told him nothing by itself. But beside it, folded into a small, tight square, was a piece of paper. He unfolded it carefully. A set of coordinates. A date 2 weeks away. 3 words below the date, written in a different hand. Don't be late. He refolded it. He put it back exactly as he'd found it. That evening, he watched her hands while she cooked. They were steady. Whatever she carried it well. Too well. It had weight, her secret. He could feel it in the room sometimes, like barometric pressure before a storm. She slept lightly. He knew because his own sleep was light, and twice he'd heard her in the night. Not moving, just awake, breathing quietly in the dark of the other room, listening to the mountain the way he did. They were alike in that way. He wasn't sure yet if that made her more dangerous or less. It was the 5th night when something shifted. He'd come in late from checking the far fence line. A storm had brought a tree down and he'd spent 2 hours in the dark clearing it. When he stepped inside, the cabin was warm and the table was set and something on the stove smelled like a memory he couldn't name. She looked up from where she was stirring, read his exhaustion without a word, and set a bowl in front of him before he'd even taken off his coat. He sat down. He ate. She sat across from him with her own bowl, and for a while neither of them spoke, but it was a different silence than the earlier ones. It had settled, gone softer. You had a daughter, she said eventually. It wasn't a question. She'd seen the photograph on the shelf, the one he'd never taken down, never moved, never explained to anyone because there had been no one to explain it to. His spoon stilled. Mara, he said. She was 7. Clara said nothing. She didn't say I'm sorry or how terrible or any of the things people said when they didn't know what else to offer. She just looked at him across the table with eyes that understood grief from the inside out. Not as a concept, but as a place you lived in. How long have you been running? He asked, quietly, not accusing. She looked down at her bowl. For months, she said. She didn't explain. He didn't push. But something had been named, and naming a thing even partially changes the weight of it. They finished the meal. He washed the bowls. She dried them. Outside, the wind moved through the pines with a sound like breathing. He did not sleep better that night, but he slept differently. The black SUV appeared on the 8th day. Clara saw it first. She was at the kitchen window when it crested the upper bend, moving slowly, deliberately, the way vehicles moved when they were looking for something rather than going somewhere. Her hand went flat against the counter. Elias, sitting at the table with a topographic map, looked up at her stillness before he looked at anything else. He crossed to the window. The SUV had stopped at the junction 200 meters up the road. Just stopped. Sitting there, engine running, he could see the exhaust vapor in the cold air. When he turned back, Clara's face had gone the color of winter sky. You know that vehicle, he said. She didn't answer. She went to the closet instead, pulled out her bag. The one she kept half-packed, he now realized, and brought it to the kitchen. I'll go, she said. I brought this here. That's not fair to you. Where will you go? I'll figure it out. Clara. His voice didn't rise. It just landed differently with a weight that stopped her at the door. It's -14. There's nowhere to go on foot. And they've already seen the cabin. She turned. Something in her face was cracking. Not breaking, but cracking, the way ice sounds before it moves. If I tell you, she said, you become part of it. I'm already part of it. He looked out the window. The SUV was still there. So tell me. She didn't get to tell him that night. They came the next morning, before dawn. 3 of them, moving through the tree line on foot, which told Elias they'd done this before, that they knew not to announce themselves on the road. He'd been awake. He'd heard the snow compress differently than wind makes it compress. He was at the door before they reached the porch. "Get to the back room," he told Clara. "Stay low. Don't come out." "Elias, go." She went. The first man came through the porch door without knocking. Big, confident. The kind of confident that comes from always being the largest threat in every room he'd entered. He scanned the cabin interior and found Elias standing in the middle of it, arms loose at his sides. "We don't want trouble with you," the man said. "Then you came to the wrong mountain," Elias said. It happened fast after that. The first man reached. Elias didn't wait. He moved into the reach rather than away from it, close inside it, and the advantage of size collapsed. The second man came through the door and caught the edge of it hard across the face. The third tried to circle left and found that Elias knew every inch of that floor, every angle, every place the light fell wrong. It was not clean. It was not the kind of fight that looked like anything in the movies. It was brutal and close, and furniture broke, and Elias took a hit across the jaw that set his ears ringing. But he'd been trained in a time when training meant something, and this mountain had kept his body hard and his mind clear, and in the end the three men were on the floor or through the door, and Elias was standing, breathing hard, bleeding from his lip. Then Clara was beside him. She had the burner phone in her hand. She'd called someone, not for rescue, he realized, but to issue a warning. She spoke 4 sentences into the phone in a voice stripped completely of fear. She named names. She gave a location. She said, "It's over. Tell him it's over." She hung up. Her hands were shaking, but only now, only after. He sat her down. He got the kit from under the sink and he cleaned the cut on her forearm where she'd caught the corner of the counter in the chaos. The cabin was wrecked. Cold air was coming through the broken porch door. Neither of them addressed any of it yet. "I was a legal assistant," she said. Her voice was quiet and even, the voice of someone who has rehearsed nothing and is choosing truth instead. 18 months ago, I processed a document I wasn't supposed to see. It had names in it, amounts, transfers that were routed through a fund that was supposed to be a charity. She paused. The man whose name was at the top of that document has a lot of reach. When I realized what I'd seen, I made copies. When I made copies, someone saw me do it. 3 days later, my apartment was searched while I was out. Elias wrapped her arm. His hands were gentle for their size. "I went to someone I trusted," Clara continued. "That was a mistake. I've been moving since then. Different cities. Different names. The coordinates on that paper, that was a contact. Someone who could get me out of the country." She looked at the wrapped arm. Then at him. "I came up this road because the one I was supposed to take was blocked. I was out of moves. Out of roads. I just needed one night somewhere that wasn't a parking garage or a highway rest stop." She stopped. "I didn't expect the cabin," she said. "I didn't expect you." He held her gaze for a moment. Then he stood, went to the shelf and moved the photograph of Mara carefully aside. Behind it, pushed flat against the wall, was a card. He held it for a moment without looking at it. Then he picked up his own phone. The call lasted 9 minutes. Elias said very little. He gave the name Clara had named. He gave the location of the men outside. The ones who were still able to walk had gone, but they were traceable. He said, "I know what this costs me. I know what you'll need from me afterward. That's acceptable." He listened for a while. Then he said, "Just end it," and hung up. Clara was watching him from the table. "Who was that?" she asked. "Someone who knows people I used to know," he said. "It won't be immediate, but it'll be real. The evidence you kept. They'll need it. I have it. I know." He put the phone down. "Get some sleep. What did it cost you?" He picked up a piece of broken chair from the floor, turned it over in his hands. "My name," he said simply. "Coming off a list it was on for the wrong reasons. Being put on a different list for better ones." He set the wood down. "Doesn't matter." But it did. She could see that it did. And she could see that he'd done it anyway, with the same quiet deliberateness with which he did everything. Chopped wood, watched roads, kept a photograph on a shelf in a cabin where no one would ever see it. She did not say thank you. It didn't feel like the right currency for what he'd given. She went to her room, and for the first time in 4 months, she did not stand at the window in the dark. 3 days passed. The call Elias made sent ripples through quiet, institutional places, the kind of places that moved slowly but moved with certainty. By the second day, there was confirmation. By the third, the name on that document was being spoken in rooms with very different furniture than it was accustomed to. The mountain was quiet again. The road was clear. The broken porch door had been repaired. Elias had spent a full morning on it, methodical and silent. The cabin was mostly restored to what it had been, though a chair was missing and there was a long scuff mark on the floor that would probably never come completely out. Clara's bag sat by the door, packed, ready. She had no reason to stay. She was at the stove when he came in from the morning cold, and the smell that met him was something with onions and herbs, something that took time and care, something that no person in the act of leaving made. He stopped inside the doorway. She turned from the stove and handed him the coffee mug she'd already filled. He took it. He sat down at the table, his chair, his mountain, and wrapped both hands around the warmth of the mug and said nothing. She turned back to the stove. Outside the window, the sky had gone the soft gray of something beginning. Snow was coming, not the dangerous kind, just the quiet, ordinary kind that covered old marks and made everything look like it had just been placed in the world for the first time. The pines were still. The road was empty. Inside, the stove clicked. The mug steamed. Elias looked at the bag by the door for a long moment. Then he looked at his coffee. Clara did not turn around. But the corner of her mouth moved. Just slightly, just enough. And she reached for the second bowl and set it on the counter beside her own, and went on cooking. Outside, the snow began to fall. And for the first time in a very long time, neither of them was alone in it.